All right, line V1, we're taking a look at learning task 6, and this is going to be video 3 or video C of this little mini series inside of, this whole line over here. We left off, we've gone through, the first video we had a bunch of stuff about what the components are, an explanation of the actions. The next video went with how we go from a schematic, which is, what we draw, to the actual wiring diagram, which is going to be, that's not the wiring, which is going to be what the actual customer is going to go and receive. And so that video is very much built around us going and doing an install of the system, because this is what we're going to do on an install, is we're going to go and start with the schematic, and then from the schematic, we're then going to go and transfer that into our wiring that we are going to have. That's not the only aspect of our trade, though, that we need to be available and competent to work in. We've also got this whole other end, particularly when we're dealing with motors. We're going to be dealing in a lot of industrial applications that are going to be requiring ongoing maintenance. And a big part of that is going to be working the opposite direction. We're going to go and call this thing a troubleshooting one, where what we have is we have got a physical installation, and then that physical installation, we don't understand, maybe it's not working correctly, maybe we just don't even know what it's doing. The customer bought a component or a piece of equipment and they just want to know how this thing is going to operate when they press the start button. So they want us to go and trace it out, and that's what this one is going to be, is us now tracing out a circuit diagram, moving from the physical over to the actual schematic. Once we get the schematic, we'll understand what's going on. First of all, we're going to start this drawing over here by defining what we have got inside of different parts over here. The book doesn't really show it over there, but you should recognize that these are going to be the components that you will find inside of your disconnect switch. So it's going to be my fusible disconnect. I've got my switches. I have also got my fuses, which are going to be there to go and provide the overcurrent protection. Not overload, but the actual overcurrent. Then I'm going to go and have another box, and inside of that other box, I'm going to go and have all of, let me just erase that because I cut off a node over there. I'm going to go and have all of this stuff. There's going to be a terminal strip in a lot of cases. In a lot of our NEMA ones, they came with pre-equipped with terminal strips. And then we are going to go and have all of these components. What we see, although it's really, really tiny in between that gap over there, is that there's 3 lines that go from my disconnect over to my starter. That's all going to be power circuit components. Inside of my starter over here, which has got both the control and the overload protection side of it, we have got 3 lines that lead to go to our motor as well. And then outside of this, we're then going to go and have 2 more control boxes. I'm going to have box number 1 over here and box number 2 over here as well. These are going to be individual remote start-stop stations that we are going to locate out there. So we're going to go through the actual wiring that we would go and have for this component over here. Now the book kind of jumps ahead and they say, hey, look at this. This is what you're going to go and make. Okay, let's pretend like we never saw that. Let's go and start with the way that we would actually track these things out. The way that we are going to go and track them out is we're not going to start like this inside of the book. The book says, oh, just find your positions, lay them out. For me to put them into this orientation means that I actually have to understand what is going on already. I don't understand what's going on already because I'm just looking at a bunch of wires inside of a box over here. Tough to go and say what it's going to go and be, so that one's not going to work well for me. And then they say on the next one over here, what we can do is then we can complete that schematic diagram by using our wiring that we are going to go and have off of those leads. Once again, I am going to go and say that that is not realistic to how we are going to deal with things. How we deal with things in the field is we are going to start by tracking down a single wire and tracing it through. We do not make assumptions. That's what the book is telling you to do here. They want you to assume that this is where all the positions are going to be. That's the wrong way to go and do it. Everybody knows what happens when you assume. Well, I think everybody does. I don't know. Anyways, we are going to go and not do this one over here. So I'm just going to start by deleting that one over there. We got a blank sheet over here with the nice high voltage lines in the background there, and we will go on to these ones over here. Here's how I'm going to trace down my circuit. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double check my power circuit. Make sure I understand it. I take incoming power, goes through a disconnect switch, makes sense, goes through a fuse, makes sense, goes through a contactor, makes sense, goes through an overload heater. That one, perfectly fine. I understand that rung over there. I can do the same thing over here, trace it through switch to fuse to contact to overload heater. That makes sense. Line 3, switch to fuse to contact to overload heater. You always want to trace through all of these all the way just to make sure that there's no surprises. Remember that if we're dealing with single phase, that sometimes we loop that extra conductor back up, right? We have got installations, we talked about this at the very beginning, where what we will do is we will come out of here and we will loop this thing back up to a top of a contact or something like that. Not in this one, I'm just warning you so you know when you double check it. I know it seems like you shouldn't have to, but it's wiser to do so. Now that we've done that, we're then going to go and start by identifying where does this control circuit get power. And then we're going to track a line down from there. So I take a look over here on line 1. I see you got a little stinger taken off line 1, taken to a fuse. That's where I'm going to start my diagram. I'm going to start by labeling this thing because I don't have a label on it yet. We will give it an actual label, F1. Over here, if it's inside of the can, I'm just going to take my Sharpie. I've always got a ton of Sharpies with me. And I'm going to go and write it on the inside of the can. It's inside of the box. Don't do it on the surface. You know, it's graffiti then, but do it inside so that you can label it and you can find it later on. I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to go and say, I know that I'm coming in from line 1 and that I'm going in through a fuse. You can either draw your fuse out like that with the fancy box, or if you want, you can make your fuse a swish, swish, like that. I'm going to do the swish, swish because it's faster for me. I'm going to label it F1. And then what I'm going to do, now that I've drawn that, is I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to go and say, okay, where does F1 trace along? So I'm going to follow along F1, and I see that it goes to a terminal number 1. I'm going to stop at the terminal number 1 because it leaves from the box in the terminal number 1. So I'm going to go and carry that one in. I'm going to start a rung now because I know it's going to be inside of a rung. I'm going to put a number 1 inside of a little box just to represent that I've got that terminal inside there. Later on, I will erase these terminals if I don't need them. But for now, it's handy to have them in. I take a look at the other side of that, and I see that one wire leaves from that. So then I would go and say, okay, I've got a wire leaving. I would identify which conduit that wire is going into, and I would track it down until I find where it goes to. So I follow this line 1. I find the conduit, goes out to here. Let's say it's the red wire. I identify the red wire coming into here, and perfect. I see the red wire connects to a stop button, and then goes through the stop button, and then leaves once again. Perfect. I can go and do that. So I'm going to go and take the 1 to the stop, and then I'm going to go and leave again. That's as far as we've traced it, right? We got the 1 in. We're now leaving. Let's go and call that thing the blue that we have for there. I'm going to trace my conduit down until I find where that blue enters. Perfect. I see that the blue comes in. It hits this 1A terminal over here, and then it goes and leaves again. Okay, so I'm just going to go and draw in another terminal. I got a 1A terminal over here, and I'm going to go back to my starter over here. I'm going to take a look at that 1A, and this one's going out in a different conduit. It's also a red wire going out into a different conduit, and so I'm going to trace that one down into here, and I see that it attaches to one side of my switch. All right, so I'm going to have a red that's attached over there. So I'm going to go and draw in a, well, sorry, not a switch, it's a normally closed push button. I'm going to have a normally closed push button that goes across to another side. We will draw that in. Now I've got 2 normally closed push buttons inside of here. What I should be doing at this point is identifying which box it's going to be in, because guaranteed, a month from now, if I come back to this installation, I'm not going to remember which is which. Let's go and identify these boxes. We're going to go and call this one PB1. We're going to call this thing PB2. It stands for peanut butter 1 and peanut butter 2. No, I'm just kidding. It's push button 1 and push button 2 for my stations. All right, so I've got PB1, PB2. PB2 is the one that had the very first line that we had coming in. PB1 has got the other one, so I'll identify those. PB2, PB1, like that. Perfect. Okay, from the other side of PB1, I'm then going to identify and see what it is connected to. So I'm going to see from here, and I see that it's got a connection that goes up top over there. I guess I could change this box actually a little bit. I just quickly sketched it before, but in reality, I should show that box looking like that. I see that there's a jumper going from the stop over to a normally open over here, which is going to become my start. They should be labeled. They should be green and red, so you can tell what they actually are. So I'm going to go and draw a jumper that's going to go straight line from here to a normally open. And where is this normally open button located in? It is located in PB1. Perfect. So I've got that there as well. I go back to this drawing over here, or to my control box over here. I'd actually have the drawing with me as I'm wandering around doing this, but and I see that that conductor that goes between those 2 points also has another conductor that is leaving from that box. So we have a red conductor coming in. We're going to say that this one's going to be my blue conductor over here. So I'm going to track that blue conductor down, and if I follow that blue conductor down, I see that it goes to a terminal number 2 inside of my switch over there. So I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to drop a rung, we call this. Does this thing go to a actual terminal? Absolutely. We take it down to a terminal. This is going to be my terminal number 2. In some cases, what you will see people do is instead of that, they will go and do like this. This just indicates where it's making connections. So that if I was looking for this wire, I'd be able to say, it's coming off of the normally open one. Or if I drew to that one, I'd say it's coming off of the normally closed. If we look at this one inside of here, it's actually a splice, which we don't have inside of a proper control circuit. But that's what they've drawn this thing in here as. So I've got this thing dropped down to that terminal number 2. Once I get down back to my terminal number 2, I'm going to label that wire. So that's my blue wire that came in from here. I'm then going to go and say, well, I'm inside of this box. There's another wire coming out of it. I might as well trace where that one is going to. And I see that that wire number 2 goes to one side of my auxiliary contact. So I'm going to draw that one in. So I'm going to take this wire number 2, and I'm going to go and draw it to an auxiliary contact like that. We've got the opposite side of the auxiliary contact. We still haven't done any connections to it, but we're going to finish up with wire 2. Okay, don't jump ahead. Go on to these ones. You screw yourself up because you forget that you still have unfinished connections inside of here. What I will often do as well, because at this point we're starting to get a little bit complex, is I'm going to use my Sharpie and I'm going to tick. I just make a little tick line on a wire once I've actually accounted for it inside of here. Just so that later on I'm not going to be like, oh, did I trace this one out or not? I've seen control cabinets that are, probably 16 feet long by 8 feet high. I've been inside of those. You just have to keep track because there's 1,000,001 wires that are going to be inside of there. So I've got that wire accounted for over there. I've got the blue coming in that's accounted for, right? We're going to stick ticks on each of these wires here because we've done each of those wires. And then I'm going to go and take a look at this other wire that's coming out. We're going to say that that one is going to be a black at this point. I know it's really small, but it's going to be a black wire coming out of that terminal number 2. I'm going to follow that black wire. I'm going to come into here. I'm going to look for that black wire. Perfect. There's my black wire. It is going over to another normally open push button. So I'm going to go and do that. So from terminal 2, we go to another normally open push button. This one is in PB2, so I'm going to label it as that. Perfect. Okay, so we've got this thing tracked down inside of there. I then go and say, have I traced out every wire that's connected to this terminal? Yep, that one's traced all the way up to there. This one here is traced out all the way up to there. This one here is traced out all the way up to there. So at that point, I can just pick another device and start from the opposite side, right? We've traced out everything that's connected to and through this number 2 junction that we have. I was last inside of push button number 2, right? That's where we left off, so we might as well continue on with that. Inside of push button number 2, I see that I've got another conductor that is going to go from the opposite side of the push button. I've got a conductor that's going to jump across to a light, and it is going to go and have another conductor that's going to head out. So all I know is that I've got this thing connecting out to a light and another one that's coming back out. We're going to call that thing the gray. Actually, we'll call that thing yellow. Okay, we'll just call it yellow at this point. So I've got a yellow conductor coming back out. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to find where that yellow conductor comes in. There's my yellow conductor. I'll put a little tick on it. I see that the yellow conductor comes back to a terminal number 3. Let's start by drawing that in. So here is my yellow conductor coming back to a number 3 terminal. As well as I've got this yellow conductor that is also coming from that same position over there to a light. Okay, I can draw it like this. I know it's a little bit hard to follow right now. And some of you are like, well, that looks like garbage because you've already seen the final result. We're going to put it into the final result, so just hold your horses, all right? We got number 3 identified. We got the light identified. That light is also going to be in PB2. I'm going to go back over here. I've identified that yellow line coming back there. It ties onto terminal number 3. Since I'm in this box here already identifying it on terminal number 3, I might as well trace out the other side of it. Ooh, whoa. undo, undo, undo. And when I trace out the other side of that yellow conductor, I see that it goes over to my auxiliary contact, as well as it goes over to my motor coil. I'm going to call that one the A1 terminal. So I will go and do both of those. So I saw that that number 3 went to the other side of my auxiliary contact, perfect, right over there, as well as it goes to my motor coil. I know. It is ugly looking, but we're developing it like we would in the fields. We will fix it. We will make it pretty. Okay, so I've got that wire number 3. I'm going to make little ticks. Did I count this wire that goes all the way over to this contact? Yeah. Did I count this wire that goes all the way over to the coil? Yeah, I did that one. Do I still have one more unaccounted for? Absolutely, I do. I've got one more yellow wire, we're going to call this thing, that is going to be leaving from this terminal number 3. And if I trace that one back up and around, I see it goes to the other push button up top over there. Perfect. So I'm going to go from my terminal number 3. I see that that wire that's attached to terminal number 3 goes all the way up to my other push button in push button station number 1. Lovely. Okay, we are partially done. It's an A1 over there. That's my light. We're then going to go back, into this one over here. Once again, we are going to go and look for what wires have we not identified. Do we have anything connected to number 6 yet? Not yet. We haven't gotten that far. Do we want to start working from number 6? Maybe. It might make sense, to start working from number 6. We can at least trace it out, but the problem is we don't know where either end of number 6 goes. So at this point, what we have done is we have identified all these devices up to a point, but we haven't identified opposite sides yet of these devices. This one is the auxiliary contact. We've identified both sides. It goes to terminals 2, terminals 3. This one over here, we have not yet identified its other side. So if I go into this coil now, I can see that the other side of the coil goes from here out to terminal number 6, as well as it goes from here out to my overload. So I'm going to do that on the drawing here right now. I'm going to go from here, I'm going to go out to my terminal number 6 and to my overload. So here's my first overload, and I'm going to go from here out to my terminal number 6. Okay, we've got that in, so we'll go back into our control over here. From here, I can go and trace out my terminal number 6. Let's go and say that this wire that's leaving from here is a purple wire. I'm going to go and trace that thing down. I see that I've got a purple wire over there as well. See, it connects to the other side of the light. So we'll go back to this one over here, and we will connect number 6 to the other side of the light over there. Then we're going to go to our overloads because we're almost done. We see that we've completed that overload over there, right? We came from the coil. We completed this line that went to number 6. We completed this line down to here. So now we're going to go through here, into another one, into here, into another one. And then from there, we follow that line and we go back up to our fuse. We will do the same off of here. So we're going to go from here into the second one, into the third one. And we saw that we came from there. We went back up into a fuse. And then from the fuse, we went to our line number 2. That's an operational circuit. It is ugly, ugly, ugly because it's ugly. We've traced it through. We've gone from component to component. What I would do now is I would say, can I neaten this thing up? What do I see that I can neaten things up? I can move some components around. I have also got a number of wires that are all considered to be the same. If I look at this on my drawing, this wire, number 3, and that is all considered to be the same wire, right? Doesn't go through any junctions there whatsoever. So what I can do with that is I can then go and, just redraw that. I see that it goes to either side. Same with this wire over here, number 6, is all one wire as well. So we can take all of that, we can redraw it, and we can end up with a circuit that will look like this. Now they called them right and left for their 2 push button stations. We call them PB1, PB2, just because I didn't know that one was over to the right and the other one was over to the left. But that's what we have inside of here. There is a redraw like this that they've done. That's one way that you can go and redraw it. The other way that we would commonly see this one redrawn is less about going up above the line. For some reason, we as electricians really like dropping down below the line. So the more common way that I would see these ones drawn out, fuse into my push buttons. I'm not going to bother with the terminals inside of here. Now that I know what my connections are, I'm just going to go and draw in my components. I'm going to draw in my first stop, and then from my first stop, I go directly across to my coil. From my coil, I usually identify that with an M, so I know it's a motor coil. I go directly across to my overload that I have. In this case, we have 3 overloads rather than just a single overload contact. And then from there, I go back into my fuse, into my line 2. Line 1, line 2. Then what I do is I just drop subsequent rungs underneath here. It's very common field practice that we're going to go and see all of these dropped like that. And then that dropped down there at the very bottom. And then for this, the light itself, what you will sometimes see is you will see it taken across like so. And it works. It is absolutely works. It can be a little bit confusing until you really get into this. You know, you can sometimes struggle with how do I, view that, because it seems like the current would be splitting or something like that. One of the easier ways initially to draw these and to look at these is to draw it like that. Is it still the same identical thing? Absolutely, it's still the same identical thing. We just now have a clear view that, yeah, that light is in parallel with my actual motor contact, right? So that's what we would do in the circuit, in the field. At this point, once I create that circuit, yeah, it's pretty easy for me to go and figure out what needs to happen, right? I see that any stop should stop this thing. I see that any start should go provide power through to the coil, which is then going to go and seal itself in, which would then go and start this thing up. Let's trace that. We would have power up to each of these over here. We would have power up to here as well. And then as soon as we press a start button, we'll press this one over here, we would then go and apply power through up to that coil. When we apply power through up to that coil, that would go and close my seal in contact, which would also then allow power to run through and up to that coil, to the light as well. And I can take my finger off of that push button, and at that point we would be running inside of here. Press the stop, you'll interrupt that current, this thing is going to go and drop out. Okay, that is our methodology of going the opposite direction. Once again, it is like eating an elephant, it's one bite at a time. You're just going to go and do little chunks at a time. Last thing that I want to go and look at on this one, by the way, is I just want to go and take a look at the way that my components are inside of here. You remember this thing where you have to go and figure out the number of wires to go and pull? The stop-start station that we're going to have for this one is going to look a little bit different. There's going to be a second conduit onto it, and then there's going to be a second starter box. It's going to have 2 push buttons, and it's going to go and have a light that's going to be off of it. And now what we need to do is we need to go and figure out which wires, how many wires I'm going to go and pull inside of each of these conduits. And it's a little bit difficult initially to sort this stuff out until we go and lay out, which components are inside of which one. And we're just going to do that looping thing that we have, okay? I want to go and take a look at my components. What I have to do anytime that I'm doing the loop is I want to go and draw a bubble around all the components that are going to be inside of the same box. Okay, so we're going to start with the right-hand box. My right-hand box has these over here, like that. Okay, that's inside of the right-hand box. How many wires, how many lines poke out the bubble? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we would need to go and have 5 conductors inside of my one conduit. Let's just go place it on there. 5 conductors inside of that conduit over there. Let's take a look at the other conduit, the one that doesn't have the light inside of it. What's inside of the other one? I've only got this and this over there. The 2 that are labeled with the L. How many wires are poking through that one? This one you got to be tricky on because you do have some wires that are poking through with the same wire twice. This is a distinct wire poking out over here. Okay, so I'm going to have a green one over there. Wire number 2 pokes out in 2 places. I only count it in 1 place that it's going to be poking out because I can make all the other junctions inside of the other box, and then wire number 3 comes out over here. You just need to be careful with this one over here. Yes, I see that I've got that line poking out up top there, but because it's the same line that we've already accounted for, we don't need to worry about that. So I can take it back to this, and I can go and say that how many wires do I need? 1, 2, 3. that I'm going to need to have inside of that conduit over there. Let's just go back to this one over here, and I just want to go and do a quick little wire count. Just with you over here to go and highlight what we have done. How many wires did we need to the small station? 3. Count that underneath the yellow highlighter over there. You see that there is a total of 3 wires that you needed to pull over to that station. Pull them now, identify them, you can sort them out later, if you were doing this as an install. Same with this one over here. If I go and take a look at that yellow, let's take a green one. But take a look at that one. You should count that on that green there, that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines that are going out to my station number 2. Just see how that corresponds to this, and you can see how that corresponds to this. It just makes choosing the number of wires going out way easier. All right, we are finally through learning task number 6. We've done it in a couple of different directions. We have taken this thing and looked at components, we built ones, and then we have troubleshot our way through as well. On to the next one.